Okay, I know I've been talking a lot about Canada, but I have to take a break today since there's a little break in the action. I mean, still a lot going on there, but it's, there wasn't anything huge that broke today yet, just the ongoing stuff. I have to talk about this ridiculous move of the Biden administration to send 3,000 American troops to Eastern Europe. Now, they're not sending them directly to Ukraine, so I'll give them a little credit for that. Actually, no, what am I saying? I'm giving them no credit. They get demerits, but it could have been worse. They could be sending 3,000 troops to Ukraine. But aside from that, this couldn't be a worse decision. According to I believe it was the Pentagon themselves, they said the purpose of this deployment is to show that that we mean business and that the U.S. is going to put skin in the game. What, you want to put 3,000 Americans there to get killed? The risk, whose lives are at risk, just to show, oh, well, look, we're serious. We got skin in the game. You can come kill us if you want. What the hell kind of a message is that? Oh, hey, if you Europeans want to get into another war, which Europeans have been at war with each other for centuries, or actually really thousands of years, I guess, because, war is as old as human history. It's just the Europeans have made an art of it. The message from the United States is basically, hey, if you guys want to duke it out, we want a piece of the action. Don't leave us out. Remember, we're here too. Remember, please shoot at our soldiers too, Russia. And so Putin was entirely right when he said earlier this week that the United States is trying to goad him into invading Ukraine. It's totally obvious, and that's why I think he won't do it. It would be dumb and doesn't make any sense. It's kind of like Assad gassing his own people. Obama specifically said, hey, Assad, I'll never intervene in your civil war as long as you don't gas your own people. And the next thing we know, we're being told by the media that Assad gassed his own people? But it'll be a little harder for the media to just say that Putin is invading Ukraine if that's not actually true. The only way that they really get away with saying it now is because, well, he really did invade Crimea, although invade is kind of the wrong word. His troops were already there. So I guess technically he did never invade Ukraine. Certainly in the Donbass, Putin didn't invade Ukraine. He didn't send in the Russian army. The people there wanted to fight, and Putin kind of had to support them because he would look really bad domestically if he just let them get slaughtered by the Kiev government. So Putin is guilty of exactly what the United States is guilty of in that conflict, and that is funding or helping to arm one side of it. But he certainly didn't invade Donbass. I've seen no evidence of that. I don't even see people really saying that directly. They just say, well, Russia invaded Ukraine. Well, they were already in Crimea when they took over Crimea. All they did was they had a base there. They stepped outside, and they said, hey, we own this now. I guess it's similar to the U.S. war in Panama. Sometimes it's referred to as the invasion of Panama, but I don't think that the U.S. really had to send. I mean, maybe they did, but a lot of the troops that were there, they were already there, because Panama's been a U.S. satellite since it was created. Panama as a country was invented by the U.S. It's a little American state, kind of like Ukraine was. Ukraine was created by the Soviet Union. The current Ukrainian state, with these borders, was created by the Soviet Union. And so it was a satellite of Russia for a long time. So yeah, they already had troops there. You don't really need to invade there. It is very similar to the Panama situation. Yet nobody even considered saying that America should be sanctioned for the war in Panama, which was much more violent than the Russian seizure of Crimea. Nobody was killed when Russia seized Crimea. Seized is really the wrong word. They were just able to annex it bloodlessly, whereas a lot of people were hurt in that whole Panama debacle. A lot of innocent civilians were killed. But, like I was saying, all of this posturing by the U.S. really is all for naught. It's really for domestic consumption here, because the Europeans themselves, the people who actually live in Europe, don't want to fight each other. Kiev does not sound like they're interested in going to war with Moscow. Paris does not sound like they're going to war with Russia. Neither does Berlin, and certainly not Budapest. No, it's the Atlantic countries. It's the United States and the United Kingdom who want to go to war with Russia. Coincidentally, it's the countries, in NATO who would be the least affected by a war with Russia, or a war between Russia and Ukraine, supported by NATO using Ukraine as a proxy. It's Boris Johnson and Joe Biden, men who have significant problems with their domestic policy, who have really, they're floundering in terms of approval. Boris is still choking under Partygate, as silly as a scandal as it is. People don't like hypocrisy. So Boris, he wants to distract from that. What's the easiest thing? Go start a war. Joe Biden, in even worse shape probably than Boris, although I guess Biden doesn't have to contend with a vote of no confidence in Commons. But Biden, he's setting new records for lows in approval ratings for a sitting president. Or if he hasn't set those records yet, he's down near the records. And certainly this soon in his presidency, to be as low as he is, things are not looking good. And that's all based off of really his domestic agenda. Yes, people say, oh, well, it started with Afghanistan. I think that most people could, if it was just the Afghanistan debacle, people would have gotten over it and they'd be past it by now. And I think most Americans are. It's everything else associated with Biden that's dragging him down politically. And so how does he distract from that? How does his administration, rather, distract from that? Riling up tensions with Russia. Now, the countries that actually do have skin in the game, who aren't just putting their pawns, placing them in Eastern Europe to get slaughtered, like the Americans are, the countries whose actual stability is at stake in this situation, what are they doing? What's France doing? What's Germany doing? What's Hungary doing? They're going and they're meeting with Putin and talking with the Russian government like civilized human beings. What is Zelensky doing in Ukraine? He's trying to make sure that he doesn't get his head chopped off. Zelensky, I think, understands that he is the president of a very poor, tiny, and corrupt country that has no chance of defending itself if it were to ever get into a war with its former imperial master. Russia and Ukraine are not like Austria and Hungary. Russia and Ukraine are like Italy and Sicily. Could you imagine if the rest of Italy, were to get into a war with the Sicilians? I hate to break it to my Sicilian listeners, but it wouldn't go over well. Russia, they have heavy industry. They have an energy industry. They are self-sufficient as far as oil and gas is concerned, and they have a robust arms industry. Ukraine has wheat fields. Italy, while they don't really have their own self-sufficient energy supply or whatever, they have a pretty robust arms industry which could manufacture arms for war, as has happened in the past for Italy. They did produce their own arms during World War II, although I understand Italy didn't fare well in that conflict. But compare that to Sicily. They have, I think wheat fields. So obviously not a fair fight. Everyone understands it would be ridiculous. The idea that Sicily, would take on the rest of the whole Italian peninsula would never happen. It'd be a joke. Same is true with Ukraine taking on Russia. Everyone in Europe seems to understand that. But yet it's the British and the Americans who don't seem to understand that. And the explanation is simple. They don't actually have skin in the game. Placing their pawns on the board, that's not skin in the game. If 3,000 American troops get slaughtered, you think the Pentagon cares? History would suggest, hell no. Skin in the game is a talking point. Those troops are better characterized as a tripwire. They get killed, and then they, all of a sudden, oh, well, there's American blood on Russia's hands, as if, if there was ever to be any kind of war like this in Eastern Europe. And that tripwire, once it gets tripped, well, then, okay, then the Americans can come back to the American public and say, oh my gosh, look, these Russians, they killed our troops. Look, our troops that were stationed in Eastern Europe, Some, like 50 of them got killed in a bombing or something, and so we have to go to war with Russia. It'd be just like Pearl Harbor, except these American troops are stationed nowhere near American territory. And so the question, which should be asked but wouldn't be asked in this situation, is why the hell were there American troops in Eastern Europe? And by this point in the story, you're supposed to say, don't know, don't care, we got to take on Russia. That seems to be the plan. That's what they want to happen. If you're one of these 3,000 troops getting sent to Eastern Europe, know that the only reason you're being sent there is to die, to justify escalating conflict with Russia. And so, hopefully, God willing, Putin will not fall for this obvious trap and take your lives. Hopefully, he will spare you and spare all of us from what could be the worst thing that ever happened, a war between two nuclear powers. All because Boris and Biden are floundering in their approval ratings. So at this point, I still think it's a pipe dream. Not going to happen. It's all performative brinksmanship. And in due time, this story too will be forgotten. And we might be able to rest easy. But again, you don't want to take your eye off of this sort of stuff, even if there's a low chance that it actually goes through, because these people can't just get away with doing this and think that it's okay. It's not okay when they do this. It's not okay when they try and scare people into thinking we're going to war with Russia. It's not okay when they act like it's a reasonable thing to talk about going to war with Russia. It would be the apocalypse. No one wins that. You could say, well, Russia's not going to win a war against the United States. No, they won't, but the U.S. won't win either, because they have nukes. Both of our countries would cease to exist. And nobody points that out. I hope that the media one day maybe realizes that and asks, hey, you're talking an awful lot about war with Russia. What would you do when that escalates inevitably to being a nuclear conflict? What's the Pentagon going to say? Oh, Russia would never nuke us. They'd never do that. They would just, if we were winning the war, they wouldn't use, nukes as a last ditch and try and take us out. No, they would just allow themselves to be defeated. Frightening. The character of the people who wield so much power in our society. But that's about all I have to say on that for now. I will see you folks back here tomorrow.